The name's Craig. Daniel Craig. Hey guys, my name is Brandon, aka the BrandoCritic, and welcome to my final 007 James Bond tier list looking at the Daniel Craig films. Now, it's a bit bittersweet to be doing this video today, at least filming it today, because on this day, No Time to Die was supposed to release here in North America, but obviously due to COVID-19, we won't be able to get that until November. So I thought, you know what? During this day, let's talk about Daniel Craig's tenure as James Bond, and then when No Time to Die comes out, you guys will get your own separate video just for that one. And fun little fact for you guys, Daniel Craig was my very first James Bond. Now, Die Another Day was the first Bond movie I ever saw, but when I became a Bond fan, Daniel Craig was James Bond at the time, and Skyfall was actually the first Bond movie I ever saw in theaters. Yes, a little late to the game, I know, 23 films in, but I'm glad I'm on the Bond fan train now, and I cannot wait for No Time to Die. So, let's look at the tier list. So yes, as you can see, No Time to Die is down there, and I definitely did have this video planned to do all of them, but you know what, I thought, let's just do the 4 that we have so far, and then let's talk about No Time to Die when it actually comes out. But that's okay, because we can talk about a great movie right now, which is Casino Royale, and you know what? Casino Royale is my favorite James Bond movie. And before I even watched the James Bond movies during this most recent time, when I started with Dr. No, going all the way up to Spectre, I would always say either Skyfall or Casino Royale is my favorite. Depending on the day, you ask me, which one you like, Brandon? I'd say Casino Royale or Skyfall. Casino Royale is my favorite. You know what? Skyfall will always be that film that I saw first in theaters for the James Bond movies. But man, Casino Royale, this movie gets better every single time I watch it. That is very, very rare, not only for Bond films, but for films in general. When you watch a movie over and over and over again, you really do know what to expect. But with Casino Royale, every single time I watch it, I recognize something new. I see a new story element. I feel more emotional, or I feel something different. And it gets better every single time I watch it. And a big portion of that is Daniel Craig. He is my favorite James Bond, right? And I know no one can ever be as cool as Sean Connery, right? No one can be as badass as he is. But man, I love Daniel Craig as James Bond. I really do. He plays that human side, right? You're able to see that human side of Bond, but then again, you're able to see just how badass and smooth and suave he is also. He's charming, he's handsome, but yet he brings it back to the roots. 007, License to Kill, is a ruthless, blunt instrument of government. And you really do feel that in this movie. This movie really harkens back to the essence of James Bond. And we've never seen this kind of story before, right? Him just becoming a 00 agent. This is his very first mission. And I think after Die Another Day, it was the perfect idea to go back to the basics. Because unlike some of the Pierce Brosnan movies, this plot and this story is so simple. It's not convoluted. We're focused on the character of James Bond. Yes, there is a bad guy with a big evil plan, but this movie really is about the emergence of 007. And it's great to see all those little things, right? We see him get the car. We see him get the suit. We see where the martini, shaken not stirred, came from. We see all these little things that are known for making James Bond as iconic as he is, and you see them pop up in this movie, and how did he get to be this way? And we also see his ego, right? They say that word many, many times in the film, but in other James Bond movies, he's kind of ruthless, he's kind of relentless, and he goes against the grain, right? He kind of does things kind of unorthodox. But you can see, he was kind of an egotistical prick. So sometimes he acts irrationally in this movie, right? James Bond is a human, and he is tasked to do something extremely difficult. He is an assassin. And in this movie, you really do feel the weight of what it means to have a license to kill, right? With the Pierce Brosnan movies especially, the body counts were just getting so high, and it was just bullet storm. Now, killing someone really has weight. And you can feel what that does to a person's soul. So not only is killing more important in this movie, but so is love, right? We see James Bond become the James Bond that we know, and a portion of that is, he sleeps around. He's a womanizer. But it's because he fell in love with Vesper Lynd, one of, if not the best Bond girl in the entire series. She is probably the most complex, the most intelligent, but yet she's also sexy, and she also fits really well with James Bond, right? Ava Green and Daniel Craig have great chemistry together, and you know what? She is able to bring out that sensitive side of Bond and really dig deep to his soul, right? And I think most guys out there can really testify to this. Sometime in your life, there will be one woman that comes along. You might not marry her, you might not end up with her, but she's able to allow you to bring out the real you like no one ever has before. James Bond's version of that is Vesper Lynd. And you add all those elements with a great score from David Arnold, a great title song from Chris Cornell, right? Especially with the very first gun barrel for James Bond's first kill. You have exotic locations, exhilarating action. This movie even makes poker intense. Martin Campbell, you're a genius, man. Le Chiffre is a menacing villain, and he's probably the perfect villain to choose for James Bond's first adventure, right? Because he's definitely not the big bad guy, right? He is working for someone who's working for someone who's working for someone, right? So he is kind of like at the bottom of the villain list, and James Bond is he's his first mission, right? He is the very first opponent that he really has to go up against. Add all that together, and you get a film that gets better every single time I see it. Casino Royale is my favorite Bond film. Cliched answer, I know, but I can't lie to you guys. And now comes Quantum of Solace, and this one is tricky. Because every single time I think of this movie, and every single time I ask anybody, hey, have you seen Quantum of Solace, and what did you think? I almost get the exact same response every single time. From movie fans, from casual moviegoers, and even when people ask me, I say the same thing. I go, yeah, it was good, I guess. Yeah, I remember liking Quantum of Solace. What happened in that movie again? And then I decide to watch it again, and as soon as it starts, it's like, have I seen this movie before? And then I remember, this is a pretty forgettable movie. And it's watchable, but it's not memorable. So for that, Quantum of Solace, it shames me to say, but it's okay. Now, if you guys are big fans of James Bond and have watched them all in a row, and you understand that James Bond has tried to evolve with the times, you know, he's been around for over 50 years, then you will definitely see that James Bond often copies what's popular at the time. You know, 2008, what were some big films then? Taken, Bourne Ultimatum. This film really doubled down on that style of action movie, and it doesn't really feel like a James Bond movie. It feels just like a knockoff version of Taken, just your average 2008 action movie. And you can really see that in the action sequences. And you look at the actual choreography of the scenes, you're like, wow, this is an action-packed James Bond movie. This should be great, right? You know, I have the list right here. You know, you got the opening car chase, the foot chase through Italy, the boat chase in Haiti, the gunfight in the Austrian Opera House, the plane chase in Bolivia, and then the climactic burning hotel. I mean, those are some great set pieces. Those are a lot of set pieces. The editing completely ruins it. None of the action scenes are memorable because you have no idea what you're looking at. The cuts are so fast that it literally gives you a headache, right? As soon as the opening title sequence actually happened, I was sitting there like, what actually happened in this car chase? I have no idea. Everything happened so fast. I'm like, okay, you need to just slow down. I don't get what the hell is happening. And you know what? That's most of the story too. There's a lot of story elements in this movie, and it feels like they're juggling so many of them. And you know what? When looking deep into them, they're actually not too bad. But there's so many of them that they can't really get the time that they really deserve, right? So they'll introduce one story element and you're like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Well, there's no time to really, dive into that one. We got to go into the next one. We got to go into the next one. We got to go into the next one. And then, there's good stories in here, but none of them really get off the ground. That by the time the movie ends, you're like, wow, what a waste of time, right? And when you're watching it, you're enjoying it, right? Daniel Craig's performance is great. He saves this movie. Without Daniel Craig's performance, this movie falls apart. It really does. You have Dominic Green as probably the most forgettable villain in the entire series. Then you have Camille, which is she's just there, right? She's just generic. She's kind of bland. Like, again, her story, it has promise, but it doesn't get time to really breathe. It doesn't get time to really get lifted off the ground. It doesn't have time to get going. And that is the best way I can describe this movie. It just doesn't have that oomph. It doesn't have that spark. And you don't really understand what's happening on screen. You're just like, oh, this is James Bond. I guess I'm kind of enjoying this. All these things are just happening and there's so much shit. And you're like, I don't know how to feel when watching this. And I know a lot of people will be saying in the comments, well, Brandon, this movie was made during a writer's strike. you know what? Try to use that excuse when you hand in a math exam. You know, when you hand in your math exam and you go, oh, sorry, teacher, I didn't have my calculator. I was drunk the last night, so I was really hungover and, all these things. I just wasn't ready. And, it was kind of like a math strike. So, you should understand. But here's my essay anyways. Or here's my exam. That's not an excuse. You're still going to fail, right? So, again, I know there's some financial problems. They needed to get this movie out. But I just wish that they took their time to really flesh out this movie, because this is a direct sequel to Casino Royale, and it feels like a huge missed opportunity, right? This movie feels like a first draft. It feels like it has some great ideas, but it's really, really rough around the edges. It's really disappointing. But then we come to Skyfall, and like I said earlier, this was my very first James Bond movie I ever saw in theaters, and even rewatching it today, and I've seen this movie many, many, many times, right? It doesn't get better every single time I watch it like Casino Royale, but even after all these viewings, I still love this movie. And right off the bat, from the opening pre-title sequence in Istanbul, you can see what's going on. And you realize that, this is probably the best looking James Bond film ever. And I really do think that. Roger Deakins' cinematography and Sam Mendes' direction, this is the most put together, well-made, beautiful James Bond movie, right? Like the opening Istanbul chase, the Shanghai fight tower, the Macau casino, Raul Silva's island, the action scenes in the tube, all of London, the Scottish home where James Bond grew up. All of it looks just visually breathtaking. And the action sequences, they're exciting, and you can see what's happening. You can actually see what's happening, thus getting invested into the story taking place during the action scenes. And then, of course, we have Javier Bardem as Raul Silva. What a great villain. He's menacing, he's powerful, but yet, keeping in the theme of 007, he's fun, he's energetic, he has screen presence, and unlike Dominic Green, he's memorable. He's memorable. He knows what movie he's in, and he steals the show in every single scene. And going away from the Bond formula, there is a Bond girl in this movie, but M is the real Bond girl of the movie, because this is probably the most central that she has been to the plot. And Judi Dench, and I've said this many, many times before, and I even said this in my watch along, she is probably the best casting decision that this series has ever made, right? She is fantastic. Add in an epic soundtrack, and you have a wonderful supporting cast. And this does feel like a love letter to James Bond for its 50th anniversary. I love Skyfall. And then we get to Spectre, and Spectre is pretty split amongst James Bond fans. And I can see both sides. I really do. And when I saw this in the theater, I really, really enjoyed it. But now I gotta go right in the middle and say, you know what? I like Spectre, right? My views on it are generally positive. But there are just two things in this movie, just two things that really just weigh the movie down. And I feel like if they were able to tweak those a little bit, Spectre could have been a sensational Bond movie, because how it starts is probably the best start to any Bond movie ever, right? It starts with a gun barrel. Then we have the Mexico City opening, and then Sam Smith's song, and I know a lot of people don't like the song, but I think it really fits with the movie, and I think it really fits with the title sequence. It works. And coming right after that sequence, and by the way, in the opening Mexico sequence, it's all one shot, or it's all meant to look like one shot, and it looks great. And then, of course, you have everyone in those Day of the Dead costumes. And then when Bond takes off his mask and you hear the little doo-doo-doo-doo with the boom, boom, those drums happening in the background, it gives me shivers. It is so awesome, so badass, so cool, so James Bond. And right off the bat, you're like, this movie is going to be huge. And you know what? This movie feels ginormous, right? So the scope of this movie, thumbs up. But here's the thing. This movie, I believe, is directed beautifully, right? Sam Mendes is a great director. It's the script where things fall apart. And again, this movie looks beautiful, right? James Bond goes to many different locations. He goes to Mexico City, he goes to Rome, he goes to Austria, he goes to Tangier, and he goes back to London. Every location looks amazing, and all the action scenes are shot beautifully, especially the Mexico City scene. My God, that helicopter stunt is just, it's jaw-dropping. Like last night, I was even just thinking to myself, this is probably the best way to start a James Bond movie ever. And I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in No Time to Die, but how do you top the opening to Spectre? Wow. And not only that, but Thomas Newman's soundtrack is sensational. But then also, we have some of the lighthearted humor coming back from the Roger Moore days. And you know what? Some people are not a fan of that, but you know what? James Bond, at least the Daniel Craig James Bond, has kind of turned into the veteran. I think it really works. I really do. But here are my issues. The story. Now, I don't mind that Spectre was behind everything from the beginning. Le Chiffre, Dominic Green, Raul Silva, Patrice, Sciarra, Mr. White, they're all part of Spectre, and at the head is Blofeld. I think it works, right? And I know a lot of people are like, well, Silva being a part of Spectre, does that really work? I'm actually okay with it. But spoiler alert for it, having Blofeld be James Bond's stepbrother or foster brother, and the whole reason why he's doing all these things is because, you know, his dad took him in. His motivation just feels very, very childish, right? You have this huge scope of the movie, right? And you really do feel that Spectre has been everywhere, right? Quantum was supposed to be this really, really dark and ominous organization, but Spectre owns Quantum, right? And you do feel it, right? The scene in Rome where it's all quiet and you see Blofeld in the shadows and you have Mr. Hinks as a henchman, you really do feel the weight of Spectre. And then you know that the head of Spectre is only doing these things because he wants to get back at James Bond because his father spent more time with him. It just... Really? It doesn't feel that gigantic. It doesn't feel that big. It doesn't feel that emotionally strong. It just feels kind of like, oh, you got more attention than I did. It kind of, loses the gravitas of Blofeld's mystery. And then we have Madeline Swan, and she is okay, right? I don't think she's as strong as Vesper or some of the other Bond girls in the past, but she does her job fine. But I don't really get the fact that she's the one that makes 007, James Bond, retire from the MI6 service. I don't really buy their really deep chemistry. I get that they're attracted to each other, but for her to be the one again, right? For him to fall in love after Vesper with her, again, context. We haven't seen No Time to Die yet, and I'm sure that these story elements will show up in that movie, right? Because Madeline Swan is in this movie. But then again, for this movie right now with Spectre, it just doesn't feel that strong, right? So you have this movie with this huge scale and this huge scope established right from the beginning, and then you have your story, which is, it's getting there, but then you realize, okay, now we have Madeline Swan, and then we have Blofeld being the brother, and it's like, it just doesn't live up to that scope that it, really had going for it at the beginning. But overall, great action, exotic locations, Daniel Craig is great as always, and it has a lot of things that feel very classic James Bond. But then again, who knows how we will feel about Spectre once No Time to Die comes out. I'm really hoping it's amazing. So anyways, guys, tell me down in the comment section down below, what is your favorite Daniel Craig movie? What's your least favorite Daniel Craig movie in terms of James Bond? And who would you like to see become the next James Bond after Daniel Craig? My pick is Richard Madden. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos just like it, definitely hit like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Take care.